All right, folks, we're here again on this fine day. We've had two interviews this day. If you want to see our first interview, you got to subscribe and you can see that wonderful piece of footage right there. But now we're doing our public interview. We got Cape 1 of Ironwood here. Cape, would you like to welcome yourself to the crowd?
Hello, everybody. I am Cape 1. I am the one of the three co-leaders of the Ironwood Federation. I am the mayor of the city of Jazeera in southern Argentina, and I'm here today being interviewed by Microwaved.
Well, it's an honor to have you up here. And I think many people kind of have this idea that S.E.E. is kind of at war with Al Jazeera, and I don't think that's true. Media is all
No,
about cooperation here, and that's why I have you up here today.
yeah, I mean our media both grew for probably separate reasons, and they grew
Hmm.
separately. I mean, not at conflict or in any way, shape, or form affiliated with one another.
Indeed. Well, without further ado, let's get dive in right into the questions here. So, how did you first get into SE, or how did you first get into CCNet in general?
So for CCNet in general, I had played with the Ironwood Federation on a different server.
Hmm.
I believe it was called that block Polis, and I had joined near the tail end of that server's career, like as that server lived on. Played with Team Tokes and Arcan for a while. We played for about a year, and then we got like sieged into oblivion on there. It was a very it was a server not like CCNet at all. So I mean, we still were alive even after like massive sieges. There was no cooldowns. You could siege during the middle of the week. It was terrible. And
Oh no.
then um, that server dies. I quit Minecraft for a while, and then I get DM'd, and everybody's like, "Hey, we're we're bringing the band back together. We're all going to CCNet." And CCNet, I didn't know anything about the server. I actually met people from other servers that I used to play on that I hadn't seen in a long time on CCNet. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. I get on CCNet, and I start my town. Originally, just a small little town on the coast of Argentina, and that's where the story began.
That's where it all comes together. So you
Yep.
you originally started in Ironwood, I assume, because they invited you. You just immediately joined the nation.
For CCNet.
Yeah, for CCNet.
Well, when I first joined CCNet, I had joined with the intention of like already being in Ironwood
Yeah.
because I only joined CCNet to play with Tokes and RKN again.
Hmm. So you did immediately join up with Ironwood.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I was there for Ironwood. That was my purpose,
Yeah.
at least going into the server.
Hmm. So being one of these like original CCNet Ironwood people, how would you say the nation has evolved to where it is now?
I'd say the nation has evolved very quickly compared to what we had expected. For as long as I had been with Ironwood, even on Ironwood on Polis, it was a very small community where we were a small community, a small little band of people in a nation, and then I mean we were still able to defend ourselves and like we were a nation, but not as large as like Rome on
Hmm.
CCNet or something like that. We were never like a huge nation. And right now is probably the largest I've ever been when it comes to Ironwood, like ever being in the nation at its extent right now. We have a lot of people that I would have never seen coming in. It's glad to have such a nicer, larger community, even with some people falling more inactive here and there. We've had a pretty good flux of people who are active coming in for people who then like leave CCNet, or even if they're not leaving CCNet, people who are just inactive in general.
Yeah.
So I'd say the nation has grown quite a bit more than I would have ever seen. And I'm glad. I'm glad to see that. I'm really glad to see our progress in that growth and managing that growth as well, making sure that we're not, overextending ourselves.
Speaking of that, managing the growth. A lot of people, especially when Ironwood started, accused it of being sort of a democracy LARP. That's a very buzzword here. Would you say that democracy is a key part?
I've heard
Or
about that. I had never ever come into Iron. I've We have never talked about democracy in Ironwood when it comes
Mhm.
to democracy LARPing.
Yeah,
From what I've heard of, like being a democracy LARPer on CCNet, we have legitimately never talked about that at all.
yeah.
It's always just been our little clique of intelligent leaders at the top. I think the closest thing is that like we like to role play, like we'll give people roles and stuff. But when it comes to actual decision makers, it's me, Solo Duck, Tokes, RKN, and then we
Yeah.
have minor national roles of people who we have for internal discussion as well.
Hmm. Yeah. So on that similar note, again, a lot of people really like sort of had Ironwood and they thought of it as a very like startup nation. Again, they accused it of being all the things that bad nations are. But now with your new siege, now with the defeat of Brazil, which is a very recent development, do you feel that
Yeah.
opinions have changed about Ironwood?
Well, for me, I come in and out of the server every once in a while. Usually I'll be like really active and then I'll probably fall back for a week because I'll have to like catch up on stuff in real life and then I'll come back. So actually kind of getting a gauge of how many people really understand what Ironwood is about is kind of hard for me. For the people who I talk to, mainly the allies that I maintain communication with, international allies at that to be uh, distinct, most of them recognize Ironwood as just being a CCNet nation similar to most other nations. I personally, I've never heard anybody accusing Ironwood of being a democracy LARPer,
Hmm. Yeah, I
and I
mean,
would hope that.
I'm saying on that
Oh,
sort of note that a lot of people kind of, and this personally, I will admit, this is what I thought for a little bit, before I
mm-hmm.
interviewed, before we did our first
Arcane,
interview with Ironwood, yeah.
yeah.
And for a period of time, I did believe, like, a lot of people insinuate these kind of smaller startup nations with, like, democracy or, they're a bad government. But Ironwood, I really believe, has developed a lot. And you guys are a testament to that, where you can really defy a lot of the things that people say about you in front.
Well, yeah, I can understand that. I mean, just kind of like I don't want to say fog of war, but like that fog of just what lies beyond the darkness of people who just did not know who Ironwood was at
Hmm.
that time. So I can see that people be like, oh, well, who is Ironwood? What do they do? What do they stand for? And I hope that we've made that clear with, for one, the allies that we've made, two, the fact that usually when it comes to international relations, it's either Stoloduck or me or Tokes and RKN. And just kind of visiting. Usually I like to promote people coming to Ironwood towns and talking to Ironwood leaders, whether that's local leaders who are our mayors or talking to Solo and I for being our national leadership. I like people actually coming down and talking to Ironwood citizens to really get that like true gauge of okay, this is who Ironwood is. These are the values that they stand on. These are the people that inhabit this region of the CCNet world.
Hmm. Yeah, that really does make sense. That really proves out. And like what I try to do, when especially when I interview smaller nations, is kind of do that, try and get you guys' voices out. But granted, now I don't think I can call Ironwood a small nation anymore.
I would not call it a small nation. I wouldn't call it a large nation, but it's definitely not a small nation. Like
Hmm.
when Ironwood was in its Brazil stage, I can understand people not knowing who we were, but we are not in our Brazil stage, and we've made that clear with our victory over the country and
Yeah.
our ability to defend our citizens in situations like that, whether if it's with a siege or with diplomacy, which we've done before.
Definitely. And like especially since I think many people's minds were changed after the Camp Ironwood siege way back when you guys had started. But now that you've actually won an offensive siege, it's very much proved yourselves.
Yeah, I mean that siege was very interesting. I mean, for the original one, it was really fun. And also for being an attacker, mainly Ham Jam, who was the main guy down there just whacking us up. it was very it was actually very fun. It was very fun, and it was probably I actually am very glad that that happened because it really helped us and a lot of people get to see who we were at that time.
Hmm. And also, I think, now tell me if I'm wrong, but did that not also build relations with Caribbean Empire at the time? Even though
It
they
did. It
were,
actually did.
yeah, even though they were attacking you, it feels as if that almost built a bond.
Well, it wasn't CE attacking us. It was Imperial Lusitania, which then merged into CE
Yeah,
at that
they're,
time.
yeah, you may
At
not
least
know
from
this,
as far
but
as I'm
they're one and the same, essentially.
I mean, yeah, I guess, especially since they merged and stuff. But like, there weren't many CE people down there. Mainly,
Hmm.
the main guy who was down there was Sam Jam. And you're
Yeah.
not wrong when you say like the relations that were built off of that. I mean, we were all pretty chill. We just had some fun, throwing grenades and hitting each other. And Ham Jim shooting me through a window when I was AFK at one point. But after that, and then after Ham Jam seeing who we were, and the fact that we weren't like toxic players or anything like that, Ham Jam became a pretty good ally of the Ironwood Federation after.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Focusing on that similar note, and you might have seen this in some of our other interviews, but I like to bounce around between nations and sort of relations you have with nations. So obviously, CE you guys are very accustomed to. You're both in the alliance, so I
Yes,
think we I think we can cover them enough. But moving northbound, how do you feel about your more enemy coalition nations? Take Floritania, who are the puppeteer to the Empire of Brazil.
personally, for my own opinion, I just don't know Floritania that much. And even though the Ironwood Federation is an alliance, and obviously if like we're both on the opposite sides of like a assault region, like we'll fight each other. I don't have anything personal against Floritania. I haven't visited them. I actually read over their newsletters the past couple times, and they seem like a very interesting country. And I think it would be cool to actually send a delegation to Floritania and actually get to know who they are.
Definitely. How do you feel about more newer nations in the North American continent? Take the American Confederation,
The
or
American
TAC.
Confederation, I remember meeting one of their leaders one time in hub, and we were dueling each other, and they were pretty chill. And I believe one of our residents was also pretty chill with them. So I mean, as long as you're chill, even if they end up joining COA or something, as long as you're chill with us, like we're not gonna embargo or otherwise like exacerbate relations with their
Hmm.
nation.
Yeah, that
There's no
makes
point in
sense.
being hostile to people if they're
Definitely.
not going to be hostile back.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. On focusing again back onto military, obviously Ironwood has proved itself militarily when it comes to land and probably movecraft warfare. Now speaking to you specifically, you own one of the few coastal cities in Ironwood. Has Ironwood ever thought about developing a naval force?
We've worked on that. We have one move crafter who was like particularly good with building ships. So for him, we would always like ask him to build ships. And then like as I said, we every once in a while people go inactive. So it's been kind of difficult to like build up a huge navy. I mean, as I said, we're not the largest nation. We're not Rome where we can just take a
Hmm.
day to print up like a whole navy. But I mean, we've worked on it, and we have some ships. We definitely have some ships. We have some designs that are ready to be printed out, and I'm sure that we'll see some Ironwood naval dominance, at least within our own sphere of influence.
I see. Speaking of that sphere of influence, what would you consider is sort of the line between Ironwood and CE in South America? I know that you guys are both part of Alliance, but where does Ironwood's sort of ideal control area fall?
For our ideal control area, typically we've maintained distance from CE, like not in terms of alliance. Like we're very good allies, and we do have some towns like on the like Venezuelan coast or like in that Guyana region. But in terms of like at like where I see most Ironwood people, typically in Jazeera or like in Bolivia or like in Argentina and Bolivia, where most of like the concentration of Ironwood towns are. That glob is mainly where I see like our sphere of influence, and then CE kind of wrapping around the coasts of Brazil and northern South America, as well as extending up into North America, like from their claims.
Hmm.
Basically, just where most Ironwood citizens live is just where we occupy.
Yeah. Following on that note, with the now recent occupation of Brazil, do you intend, and I know they surrendered, so I'm gonna want you to elaborate on that a little bit more. But with Brazil falling under occupation, do you feel a responsibility to kind of keep Brazil down, or is this just sort of a hand slap, don't do it again sort of siege?
Well, that's something that I would have to talk to my leaders about as well. I mean, the next steps moving forward after our victory. Obviously, for now, Brazil's going to remain under Ironwood occupation. But for moving forward on how the two nations are going to have to exist, whether that's merging or Brazil remaining under occupation or whatever else just happens from here on, I mean, that's just something I'd have to talk to my guy Solo Duck about, and possibly the leaders of Brazil.
Oh yeah,
I mean, just
definitely.
whoever, all the parties involved. Because we met with the Brazilians before, and they weren't terrible people. Like, I mean, they're not like they're still decent CCNet players. Though I believe it's in CBC, Gray Mesa's new news channel,
Yeah,
where the main reason why Solo Duck and I had siege Brazil in the first place was just because they were camping his town. They were camping Machu Picchu, and they had killed a couple Ironwood citizens and stolen their materials. And even though our nations had been at odds for a little bit, because we were two different nations and we were in alliance and they were a vassal of Floritania, we didn't really have many plans of like actually trying to invade them because we didn't really like, okay, they're there, but as long as they're not doing anything, that's not our problem. And then they did something, and then it did become our problem. So that's the main reason why things ended up the way they were.
hmm. Do you ever think that Brazil and coalition would mount an attack on, say, Fort Ironwood?
Well, I mean, if they want to retaliate, they will. I would hope not. I would hope that they would want to stabilize the situation. I mean, usually for someone like me, and I believe I remember watching Gray Mace's interview where he talked about this a little bit too. I do enjoy just building and like town building, nation building, building highways and developing infrastructure, making cool builds and actually having something to show rather than me spending all my time brewing pots in a siege base or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have an empire, you can have the greatest war machine ever, but if all your towns are just siege bases and hoppers and chests and war storage, there's not much to see, there's not much to do, there's not much to live in. And obviously, I'm sure that we'll be at odds. And I'm as I said, I've always been staunch when it comes to fighting against those who wish to fight against Ironwood, and we will always defend our federation. But when it comes to like trying to create like the current global alliance, like super war that's been going on ever since before I've been on CCNet and currently, I wouldn't want to start like any long lasting wars. Which I mean, I'm sure that the Brazilians will try to, whether if that's revolting or just attacking Ironwood citizens. I'm sure there's stuff that will be happening, but I'm always open to talking. Solo Duck's
Hmm.
always open to talking. Like I mean, as long as we have that communication, even if you, even if it was like you want to tell me I just don't like you and I want to seize you, I'd rather you do that. Like just tell me like we're just enemies and that's just how it's going to be.
Yeah. That really
If you
makes
wanted to
sense.
do that,
Yeah.
if you
You know,
want to talk, if you want to come to the negotiation table, that's fine too. And I'm always open to that.
I think that's a very honorable pursuit. Not many people, sadly, not many people in CCNet have that kind of viewpoint. That's a very positive viewpoint. I thank you for having that.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Moving away from that sort of from just war in general, uh, Ironwood has two forts. This is something that's kind of been glossed upon. I've thought about it personally. Why do you guys feel in I can't remember fully, but did you guys build Fort Iron, or was it former fort in the area?
Fort Ironwood was built by us. We had designed that fort originally because when we became a nation and when we started getting a lot of towns on, we had to make sure that we weren't like having towns under occupation. So and you have to have at least one fort, I believe. You have to have one unpeaceful town. So
Uh,
Fort Ironwood
oh
was built
well,
by us, and that was the original fort.
yeah. In I'm not.
If you're referring
I
to,
understand that Fort Ironwood was built by you guys. That's very evident by the flag on top of it.
yeah, yeah.
But I'm talking about the fort slightly northeast of it, Fort Iron, Iron alone.
Okay, so Fort Iron. Fort Iron was a former Varunan fort, I believe. It was a Varunan fort, and when Varuna had fell, when Varuna fell, that fort like completely died, and then some guy went and he reclaimed it, and he wanted to join Ironwood, so we let him in. But we haven't really done anything with that fort. Like it's still good. It's still a good fort. I mean, a little tuning up, and it would be an active fort.
Hmm. So, would
But we
you?
don't have any plans of having multiple forts at least. 'Cause, I mean, there's nothing to claim up there.
Yeah, that's a fair viewpoint. Moving away from this sort of war torn conversation to moving north. So again, you guys, I think you mentioned Grey Mesa before. How do you guys feel about Canada? They're also a member of Alliance. I know Canada is a very vocal member of CCNet, or Canada itself has many vocal members of CCNet. Have you visited Canadian towns? How do you feel about them?
I have not had the chance to visit Canada, even though I have planned on it many times. The one time I was going to visit Canada was during that big tea party,
Hmm. Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, that big tea party, and I originally was going to go, but I was not able to. I was not able. I wasn't able to at that time because I had stuff that pulled me away. But when I get the chance, I'll definitely take a Zep or a boat, and I'll go and visit Halifax or something.
Yeah.
When it
I
comes
highly
to the
recommend
leaders
it.
of
It's a very beautiful town.
oh, I'm sure. I've talked to King Albus a lot, and he's the main guy that I know that runs Halifax. And
Hmm.
both of us very like share very similar views on making sure that our towns look nice and stuff. So I can't wait to go see it.
Oh yeah, definitely. On moving again to another nation, to your far, far north with Greenland. Greenland, very interesting nation on CCNet. They're one of the only other fairly active media outlets besides me and you. How do you feel about the far north to you guys?
Um, when it comes to Greenland, I really like their newspaper. That's one thing. Their newspaper is very interesting. It's glad to see other media. When it comes to most of the Greenlanders, I've only met the main guy that I remember ever talking to was only Ivanix, and he's been really cool. And we've been allied. So, I mean, as I said, usually I don't like to talk about nations that I don't know too much about. But from my experience with Greenland, they've been very kind and very cool. So I'd say
Mhm.
they're a pretty nice nation.
On the flip side of that, moving south, many nations have existed in that sort of belt of Antarctica. We have countries like Exodus, and obviously you have EPF on that sort of area. Are there any ambitions of expanding into Antarctica coming from Ironwood?
I don't see any reason why we would, other than like most of the towns that joined Ironwood ever since like our original expansion when it was like me, Solo Duck, and some of our original leaders. Most of that expansion was just people who came to us and asked. So if you ask, and as long as you don't have like any beef with, like any severe beef with a neighboring nation, you can always join. But in terms of like actually going and trying to like set up spheres of influence in that region, I don't see any reason why we would, especially when the elite penguin force is down there, and there's no reason for us to like draw a line with EPF on a continent that is basically theirs. I mean, I don't really see anybody else down there, and Exodus fell a long time ago.
Hmm. Fair point. So, in other words, unlike Argentina, you don't want to draw lines in Antarctica.
Yeah, I mean that. I mean, I don't think it would be very favorable to us when it comes to South America. I mean, CE and Ironwood are very friendly, so I mean, I'd say it's a pretty soft border. It's not like we're enforcing anything like that.
It's
When it
not
comes
like there's a
to,
wall.
yeah, there's no wall or there's no like significant line where it's like you can't claim anything up here because we're allies. I've been up to CE towns. I think some CE people have been down to Machu Picchu. I mean, we come and go as we please, so that's not really anything super serious. When it came to Brazil, obviously, when it was pretty obvious that like, okay, we're kind of on like different sides. Even when we were still like more chill, we were just like, okay, well, as long as they're just in their region, like that doesn't bother us. As long as they're not trying to poach Ironwood towns, that's not an issue with us.
Hmm. Moving to the final nation in South America or South America adjacent with Scotian Sea. Scotian Sea has been a country for as long as I can remember. Have you ever communicated with people from the Scotian Sea Islands? How do you feel about them?
For Scotian Sea, PHPH, he visited my town one time, so that was very nice. We had a good conversation. Um, King Tokes was our main guy who talked to the Scotians, and they've always been very nice. They actually came and they helped Cap Banner during the original siege on Camp Ironwood,
Oh
so
wow.
we've been very good. I think if you were to check, we're not allies, but that's just because of the diplomatic point system, and we told them ahead of time.
Hmm. I
So
see.
in that, like, I'd say we're still. I mean, we're good allies. We're good allies,
Yeah.
and they don't have much beef with people too, which is very nice for us.
Hmm. Moving now to our subscriber submitted questions. Um, oh wait. Actually, wait, no, that was early on. Never mind. Moving on to our subscriber submitted questions. Yellow has a question. Canada and Ironwood were very tight allies, and we all know the new nation TAC is getting really close with Canada. So if OE or Floritania would see TAC, would you aid them?
Well, if TAC is an ally of Canada, inadvertently they'd probably be an ally of Ironwood. And then, as I said, TAC and Ironwood have had mostly good relations as of now. If TAC, I think the biggest thing would be if TAC were to apply for alliance membership. If they applied for alliance membership and Canada would vouch for them, if Canada and TAC become allies, if they were to join alliance, then I would definitely show up.
Mhm. Finally,
I mean,
this is
as,
probably one of our last
as,
questions
as a
from
caveat,
what?
sorry, as a caveat, I mean, obviously, I'd talk to Solo about it, but when it comes to showing up for allies, Ironwood always likes to show up for allies.
Mhm. Anyways, moving to probably one of our final subscriber questions. Stoviet has a question here. Would Al Jazeera ever host an interview?
Would Al Jazeera ever host an interview? I had thought about that. I didn't think it would be super necessary because most of the interviews are just done by you, which is why I came on here. I
Hmm.
mean, if I had like if I had a bunch of people all like spam ping me in the middle of the night and said give me an Al Jazeera interview, I probably would. If they were like I want to see Al Jazeera do interviews, I mean I wouldn't see any reason why not. I never had really plans for it. I usually am very busy, so I usually don't have a lot of time to sit down for interviews or for like a podcast or anything like that.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, if I ever had time and if the demand was there, like if I did have like a significant amount of people who were like, I want to go see an Al Jazeera interview, I mean, I would definitely do. I would definitely think of something.
Yeah, well, I think with that, unless the subscribers have any other questions, we should be good to end the interview. Um, I did not realize this till now, but we've gone almost hellaciously over time. But from
No,
there,
it's a
do you have
good
any other
conversation.
questions for me or anything else you want to say?
I don't have many questions for you. I mean, I've already talked to you most enough, and this was probably one of the main things that I think could have been for me getting a feel on who you were as well, which is very nice. I
Yeah.
enjoyed this interview.
I enjoyed it as well. And
All right,
I
but yeah,
get, yeah, I guess with that, my final. Oh, I forgot to add a shameless plug-in. Uh,
just
oh,
plug in and
oh, what do I add? Okay.
let.
Hold on. We have to go to my notes app on my phone. I've gathered a list of shameless plugins. My first
Read them off.
shameless
Read them
plugin
off.
of this new shameless plugin era is Pastoral Uber. Have you ever thought about driving in a car with another person? Sure, it's great. But have you ever thought about being on a bike with your Uber driver? Have you ever thought about walking with your Uber driver? No? Well, we have the new thing for you. Pastoral Uber. When you can't afford to get a regular one, but you still want someone along for the ride. Alright. Well, with that final shameless plugin, I'd like to end the interview there. So I'm gonna cut now. Is there anything else you would like to say?
No, that's most of everything I wanted to say. Probably if there was like one final statement, the Ironwood Federation is a very nice nation, full of mostly nice people. As long as you're chill with us, we're chill with you. And I'd love to talk to anybody who would love to talk to me. That's all I have to say.
Well, thank you again for coming on here. It's been an honor talking with you. You're a very nice person. It's very great having you on the show. And this has been Microwaved One of S.E.E. News. And thank